Yes, I'm Joly, and yeah, I'm the CEO of Over Interactive. Here, we are a Vancouver-based boutique digital agency that specializes in building kind of ideas and innovation specifically for film and TV, although we have started to work with more kind of corporate clients as well. And so, you know, some of the stuff, and we are a very tech-enabled agency, so we started by building this big modular framework. So our superpower is working to get that minimum viable product to market really fast, that smallest thing that we can then use the audience to iterate with. Oh, I can see my fonts didn't show up. Okay. So we work with, anyway, and that's basically, I don't want to go into the technology too much just for the sake of time, but all of these experiences were built on the same technology for some of the people in this room. Disney, Weinstein, CBC, Vatele, all of that stuff. Some of these things we're in our second season with, like Heartland and Live Right Now, and some we're not. Hopefully we're going to get to do that again because that was a lot of fun. We also do a lot with analytics and also data visualization, turning stuff into meaningful, actionable data for creative stakeholders. That could be looking at, again, unstructured data like Twitter. This is information visualization we did for Carnegie Endowment for Peace. That was a little piece of a dashboard for Kraft Hockeyville last year, and also PwC, which was visualizing every single BC tech company in every sector from 1896 until today. And that one's still in beta, but that's, again, these really interesting problems we get to solve that are all media related. So the two kind of ones I had a eureka moment, and this is what I'm going to talk about today, and really talking about the social web being a broadcast medium and needing its own formats. And kind of thinking, just like radio needed its own formats and TV does, so does this now. And it's different from just the internets. This is actually its own breathing, living thing. One of them was working with Cover Me Canada, again with Paul and the gang here at CBC. So the great thing about this is where we were brought in, and this is most of the time we're brought in as a bolt-on, which is unfortunately where kind of digital agencies like me are at. Still, you know, we wish we were brought in a lot earlier because we can do a lot more damage for producers. But in this one, we really started to look at bringing the audience and making the audience a fan, and again, building that idea of audience equity that Tessa talked about earlier. So this was actually something to engage the audience between Sunday nights, and also looking at that kind of millennial generation that we wanted to build, looking at how they share, evangelize, take stake in content in radically different ways than any other audience before it, and they live on the social web. So basically, the more that these performers basically connected with their audience, and we would tie together like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, the more that they tweeted, retweeted, any of that social activity, we would give the performers trending score. But more importantly, the more that the fans did that and got their friends to do it, they would get an influencer score. And they would move from being like just fans to actually being super fans. And this actually had a really great effect because the more that they did that on Fridays when we closed the voting window, if they were in that top 50 percentile, they get an extra 10 votes. Top 40, they get an extra 20 votes, and so on and so forth. So they would really become tastemakers and move the needle. And the combination of those votes and that score would be determined who got immunity on the following Sunday. So we actually got to break the top-down model and rewrite some of the rules on the show, and had one of these eurekas where we kind of did 2.7 million social impressions. To give context, and you know, Paul can articulate it better, but that was basically Dragon's Den and Battle of the Blade combined times a couple multiples, and you know, CBC's two biggest shows at the time. But this also represented something for me that I'm going to talk about, a format we're developing right now, that's actually a place that we can also find revenue. And that was the interesting part about that. The next one was Kraft Hockeyville we did, where we moved this had been going on, I think it was in its 6th year, and we actually did it again this year, but unfortunately had to shelve it because of the lockout, and had lots of really cool things we were going to do, again, building on this success. But again, tying together all of these big, the big three as I call them, into an application with a big back end, adding tons of game layers, missions, all of this stuff, creating these big communities around arenas across Canada. And the great thing about this is actually, I believe, like the last two are actually little formats or little water cooler apps unto themselves that generated their own audience and their own connections. In fact, the great thing about this is this wasn't associated with the TV show. It was just something they talked about during periods of hockey on Hockey Night in Canada. But yet, you know, we saw 250 communities across Canada generate 10,000 pieces of direct user-generated content, not to mention all the newscasters, all the members of parliament that stood up in this and did all this other great content for the brand and the stakeholders. It was obviously Hockey Night in Canada, CBC, NHL, NHLPA. In the last 3 days of voting, we did 11.7 million social votes in this country. So again, that idea of building big community. Other stuff we're piloting right now is actually this dashboard that we're going to make available to everybody, again, that looks at structured data, and this all goes on the iPad. It's all for creative stakeholders. And looking at also unstructured data, particularly, and as you can see, there's a bunch of projects like Dragon's Den and stuff that you can pop around and do a lot of stuff in comparison and build workbooks and stuff. Again, a longer conversation, but this is how we start to look, again, being very, very audience focused. I talked about the social generation, again, a focus, and again, social web is broadcast medium. These are two things that I said I'd really talk about because I really believe that there's ways that we can create these new experiences. And the first of which we're going to do is this one called Cineku. So my belief is a digital agency should always be creating new product or, in our case, new content. So what we're going to do is we've kind of created this. Here's actually a little video that kind of illustrates kind of the value proposition. I don't know if is there volume? So basically, you can just watch this, but we're going to we've created this platform, and it's a platform and studio model that's going to finance one feature film in Canada this year up to $1 million with a guaranteed theatrical at Cineplex Odeon. So we're actually already in our intake period right now. It basically, this whole thing plays out over the social web. And again, looking at those 18 to 35-year-olds, they are actually the content creators, and this is their format. So, you know, how we're going to do this, I'll talk about the disruptive, but I'll talk about the opportunity. And because this was actually something when we were looking and talking with Michael Kennedy, just like, you know, TV producers want to bring these guys to the television. You know, Michael's got a problem too. He's losing these, slowly leaking that generation from the cinemas as well. So when we looked at the problem, we did it through, you know, and I'll kind of whip through this. It was kind of the interesting thing about the world today. There's really, like video games and everything else, everything's becoming really polarized. You either have the two things that work, big tentpole movies or sub $5 million independents. Now, the nice thing about it is we can make these movies in Canada. So when we went to Michael, we were like, okay, what if we could create a platform that did 5 things that basically identified new talent, de-risked new IP, reduced discovery costs, built audiences faster and earlier than ever before, even before financing, but more importantly, measured everything and moved away from a packaging comparables model. So the other thing was, how do we bring, again, one of the things about being content creators in this room, how do we bring private money back into the system? So one of them was the interesting thing about looking at content, moving it away from a high-risk waterfall model, which is lots of upfront risk capital with no guarantee of performance or audience at the end, to an agile fail-fast model where we go to market again with that minimum viable product, and then basically use the audience to help us decide if we should move ahead, invest more resources into it, or fail fast and fail hard. Kind of very much like an entrepreneur does, or myself when I'm in this particular startup. So everything we do, we look at it through a different lens, not in terms of being super script focused necessarily, although it's very important, but really looking at the audience first. And more importantly, like Tessa, audience is our equity. And that's the way I think, like our whole company looks at it that way now. We look at lifetime value, we look at churn, we look at reach, we look at sentiment, all of those things that are important, and identifying who are the fans and who are the super fans in all of this. And also turning the next generation of content creators into entrepreneurs, teaching them values that are a lot different than the values of, you know, the older linear media models, because it's very important. So that's actually, so what we in fact are is actually a film accelerator. We take the principles of a tech accelerator, of which I'm a veteran of 2. We actually, Cineku came out of Grow Lab. And a tech accelerator, basically the idea is really smart angels, VCs get together, they find entrepreneurs with huge ideas, and they kind of put you in a headlock. Almost done, okay. and basically kick the crap out of you for about 3 months and do what would have taken me a year and a half to do, and then capitalize us at the end. So we don't want to take on any traditional media because that's a fool's game. You can't, especially I can't take on Hollywood because they've got just way too much money for prints and advertising. But like Tessa said, you can moneyball them. You can use all these analytics to spend marketing dollars better. Instead of being a shotgun approach to billboards, radio ads, bus stops, all of that stuff, we become a sniper by using social media to see where the sentiment is and where to put smaller bits to achieve larger value. And obviously their big call to action was the $1 million and the guaranteed theatrical. Everybody loves that. Low barrier to entries to get into this format. You just need to be a team of 3. And our minimum viable product for these entrepreneurs is a 2-minute trailer that we then do basically 9 missions to kind of get them to the final 5. And this all unfolds all over the social net. There's already destination. We know this movie is going to be shown in winter 2013-14. And then we move through a process where every week they have a little mission to do. There's a voting round, very much like Cover Me Canada. They vote. There's a jury of 5. And then there's a film production that's very traditional, but also has this filmmaker's journal that they continually update. And we're going to open up something to bring in another bunch of audience, which is called Sonicu, around composers and bands to align the sound and vision of this particular generation. There's lots of mentorship throughout this. There's already guys like Brad Pellman, who's here, and guys like Neve Fishman and stuff that have come that are going to help support these guys through this process. And this is a format we're going to be launching. Yes, we're piloting here, but we're already talking with guys like Village Roadshow and NCM. Pilot rollout. I'll try and finish this up fast. I see Paul pushing. So we've already done the roadshow, 10 city tours. So we actually did boots on the ground marketing, and it was all the kids tweeting and doing all this stuff, building all the social hype for us. Filmmaker intake's going on now. I think we have about 60 in the pipe right now. March, we open up to audience, top 10 option. This is, we're going to try and align with the Banff Media Festival, where these guys will actually have to pitch the final 5 in front of a huge audience. Still in negotiations. Production begins, and then world premiere. And this is actually one of the things is there's no losers, because this isn't a contest. It's actually recoupable financing. And this is their profile page. So even if we don't finance them, we get them all buttoned up. So maybe some other producer comes along and takes these guys on. And yes, Teleku will be coming. I'm Jay Joly, and thank you very much.